His knee buckles. His body drops onto the grass of the Stade de France, and it takes 31 seconds. That's all for Cristiano Ronaldo to make the decision that will define the rest of the night. He gets back up. This is the 9th minute of the Euro 2016 final. What happens next? The whole world will remember through a single frame. Tears and a moth landing on his face. But before that frame, 16 more minutes have to pass. And those 16 minutes are the part of this story almost no one lived through. Portugal was playing the final in France, against France, in front of their crowd, their atmosphere. For Ronaldo, this was not just another match. 12 years earlier, in 2004, he had already stood in the Euro final. And that Portugal side lost to Greece on home soil. 12 years later, he finally had a second chance. The last one, as he put it himself, not just for him, but for an entire generation of players he grew up with in the national team. The night before the final, by his own admission years later, he barely slept. Medical staff iced his knee at 7 in the evening, and he had to be up again by 9 the next morning. That's a 14-hour gap. In interviews right after the match, he said he'd slept 8 solid hours. The truth, years later, was very different. 9th minute, Dimitri Payet goes in for a 50-50 ball. Nothing extraordinary, a contact that happens dozens of times in every match. But this one lands directly on Ronaldo's knee. He falls. He winces. Team medics rush onto the pitch. And here begins the part that has been erased from the collective memory of that night. He gets up. Right there on the field, his knee is tightly bandaged. Not because anyone believed it would fix the problem, but because the alternative was unthinkable. He keeps playing. Think about that for a second. Not a friendly match, not a routine game. The final of the biggest tournament in international football, over a decade in the making. And a man whose ligament may already be tearing under the tape keeps making runs, keeps demanding the ball. A few minutes later, contact again, another fall. Medics sprint onto the pitch again, with the same unspoken question, can he continue? And again, he stands up. This repeats several times over the first quarter of an hour. Ice, an attempt to stand. A short burst of running, another fall. From the outside, it looks like a series of separate incidents, but inside, it was one continuous, escalating sensation. That with every attempt, the ligament was tearing further. 16 minutes, not a single injury, as this story is usually told, but a slow, agonizing realization that the body was no longer obeying the will. Minute 25, another fall. But this time, it isn't the nature of the impact that changes, it's his face. He sits down on the grass, looks down at his knee, and starts to cry. This is the frame that went viral around the world. This is the exact moment a night moth lands on his face, as if scripted by no one. And a tragic moment suddenly turns into an internet meme. Within minutes, dozens of Ronaldo's moth accounts appear on Twitter. One of them apologizing to the footballer for making him cry. People joke, make edits, and talk about the insect more than the captain's actual injury. But behind that almost comic image lies a much simpler, harsher truth. A man who spent 16 minutes refusing to accept the obvious finally gives in. He's carried off on a stretcher. Ricardo Quaresma comes on in his place. Because of that substitution, Ronaldo also loses the chance to overtake Michel Platini's all-time Euros goal-scoring record, a personal milestone that mattered to him but got lost in everything else that night. What comes next rarely makes it into the retelling of this story. Ronaldo doesn't go watch the match on a locker room TV. He goes back to the bench, already in extra time, injured, bandaged, physically unable to play. He sits next to coach Fernando Santos, shouting instructions, gesturing, trying to manage the game from the sideline like a second coach. He later explained it simply. Being alone, away from the team, was more unbearable to him than the pain in his knee. And in extra time, the only goal of the final is scored by Eder, a substitute forward the fans barely believed in. A player openly mocked before the tournament even started. Not the star captain the entire country held its breath for. A player almost no one noticed. Portugal becomes European champion for the first time in its history. And the hero of the night is not the man everyone expected it to be. Dimitri Payet, for what it's worth, later publicly explained that moment in the 9th minute, saying it was an ordinary contest for the ball with no intent to injure. But that didn't stop the wave of hatred aimed at him on social media, which didn't die down for a long time. Looking at that entire night as a whole, not just the viral frame with the tears and the moth, reveals something far more human than what's usually remembered. 3 times he fell. 3 times he got up. Once he bandaged himself, knowing it probably wouldn't help. And when his body finally had the last word, he stayed with the team anyway, in a different role, because being alone felt worse to him than the pain itself. We remember moments of triumph and moments of tears because they're simple, easy to fit into a single frame. But the real story almost always hides between them, in the minutes no one shows in close-up, because there's no victory or defeat in those minutes, just a person who refuses to give up until the body itself forces him to sit down on the ground. If this story got to you, subscribe so you don't miss the next ones, the stories most people never hear in full. And tell us in the comments, should Ronaldo have kept playing after that first hit, or should he have walked off right away?